You're listening to Digital Employee Experience, a show for IT changemakers. Let's get into the show.
Hello, changemakers. One and all, welcome to the DEX Show. I'm Tom McGrath, joined as ever by Tim Flower. Tim, I want to say how are you, but not just in the flippant, casual way that we usually ask. I really want to know, how are you today?
Wow, we're going to get into a whole session, are we, Tom? It might be our longest podcast episode.
Oh,
ever.
No. Oh, no.
No, so I feel like I repeat myself on these, but each one of these episodes we do is unique and fun, and I look forward to all of them. This one is interesting because, at NextThink, we're real busy these days. Workload is high. We all work across a lot of time zones, so you really don't know when your day ends and starts and ends. It eats into, your brain is awake during the evening, and it eats into your sleep pattern. Then the next morning, I'm tired and I'm grouchy. So overall, Tom, I'm really good, but I'm starting to feel kind of on the fringes of, I wouldn't call it burnout, but I'm absolutely interested in talking with Betsy today.
Thank you for your candor, Tim. Indeed, it sounds like you've been doing too much work, too many podcasts, too many Zoom meetings, and you might indeed be on the verge of burning out. But have no fear, as you've alluded to already, we have a perfect guest to help advise us together on this issue. She is Betsy Bula, all-remote evangelist at GitLab. Betsy, welcome to this emergency Tim-centered edition of the DEX Show. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
As are we. So first of all, Betsy, tell us about yourself. Tell us about GitLab and specifically its history as a remote-first employer.
Sure. So I'm Betsy. I am an all-remote evangelist at GitLab, and GitLab is actually one of the world's largest all-remote companies. My job on our team is to help share remote work with the world. So we talk a lot about how other companies can do it, how GitLab does it, and really want to share our best practices. And I have been on the GitLab team for about 3 years now. I work most days in my home office in North Carolina alongside a very needy golden retriever, and I love working remotely. So a little bit about GitLab too. We have actually been remote since 2015. So we've been really fortunate that we've had a lot of time to really intentionally build our culture and our practices around remote work long before the pandemic. So we now have more than 1,400 team members across 65 countries around the world. So very distributed team across many time zones. And as a company, we make an amazing collaboration platform. So the GitLab tool is actually the DevOps tool for developers to help them build and make software. But it's really, our organizational design is also pretty fascinating. So that's what we love to talk about too. And, again, my team's job is to share that with the world and make sure that other people feel equipped to be able to, implement remote practices on their teams, no matter where they are sort of in this new remote spectrum that a lot of companies are on. So we've actually developed more than 50 guides about remote work, and we have a playbook that distills a lot of that information. So we want to be able to enable these companies to use that as a blueprint to establish these things on their own teams.
Hybrid work is not new. We've been doing it for 20 years, but it's about the scale. During the pandemic, companies were 100% remote, and now we're going to be this maybe potentially 100% hybrid versus, 10, 20, or 30%. NextThink's very similar. We've been remote and have very few offices around the world. So we've got a lot of employees that are permanently remote. I'm curious, though, what the switch was like at GitLab specifically during the pandemic. I have to imagine it was less abrupt for you than some other customers I've talked to that were very abrupt. But there still had to be that sense of the before times and the after times, right?
Absolutely. So, I'll kind of take a step back and just say that in general, the past 18 months during this global pandemic have not been optimal or normal remote work for anyone, even for a company like GitLab. So what we've all been experiencing is forced work from home in a pandemic, not remote work. So that's always a really important kind of level setting conversation to have, is what we're all missing some of the best parts about remote work. And that it's not just about removing the commute. It's that you can work from wherever you have an internet connection. It's the freedom to be able to relocate if you want to for family or quality of life. So there's so many parts of the great benefits of remote work that even those of us who know about them are not experiencing them at the moment. So yes, I would say, GitLab again has been so fortunate that we had all of the, the pieces in place to be able to support our team through this. But it's, become a situation where people in the past 18 months have had very different experiences all over the world, in the sense that some of our team members have had their kids at home with them and are trying to be teachers all of a sudden. We've got, people like me with their significant others home every day for the first time, and learning how to deal with that. And then there are also plenty of people who live alone and are, isolated more than they've ever been. So it's a very, very different experience for every person, but it's like an unprecedented, for lack of a better word, level of duress that everyone's experiencing, even if they are used to typical remote work. So for us, there definitely was that before and after, just in the sense that, I think people sort of assumed outside of GitLab that, oh, they're fine. They are an all remote company. But we were really grateful to see that our leadership very quickly realized that they needed to figure out ways to support the team and make sure that everybody, knew the resources that were available to them and could take time off when they needed to, and just handle life outside of work, because it has been a lot for everyone over the past 18 months. So yeah, I think, no matter who you are, it's been quite the chapter.
And yet, no doubt, that history in remote work equipped you rather well for the pandemic, perhaps better than many. And I have a question about that, specifically around management styles in the remote context, because a lot of people don't realize this, but I actually manage Tim. I actually do. I don't really. Not at all. But if I did, what is, before we get onto Tim's near burnout here, just talk to us about good management approaches for the remote context, and how that context dictates management style and leadership hiring practices at GitLab.
Yeah. So I think, especially for companies who are making a remote transition this year, or almost 2 years, it's just wild. It's important to recognize that not every leader that is a great leader or manager in a co-located or in-office setting is going to just naturally know how to be a great leader in a remote setting. So almost more of a note to leadership of companies and teams is to make sure that you're upskilling your managers and your people and giving them those opportunities to learn how to be a good remote manager, because it may not just be this natural thing. That said, I will say, as we're hiring leaders and managers, we do look for people who are, have certain qualities like being empathetic, very self-aware, someone who has sort of that servant leader quality. We look for people who have a bias for documentation, because like I said, that's huge for GitLab or any remote team, or really any team at all. And then people who are able to build trust with their team. So those are things we definitely look for during the hiring process. I would say, honestly, for most team members, because, we want everyone to sort of feel empowered to have those leadership qualities too. And we do actually have a whole guide in our all remote guides on how to be a great manager, and as well as a training course that we've developed with Coursera, where leaders or managers or aspiring leaders can take this great training to kind of understand where they need to up level and build their remote skills.
So let's talk about burnout and my personal counseling session here. I talk to a lot of companies, a lot of senior leaders and individual contributors. And the more I talk to them lately, and as they kind of get retrospective, there's a feeling that employees really actually have been more productive without their commute to the office or without the disruptions and the walk-ups. But there is pressure to work more, or at least have to deal with the blurred lines between where work starts and stops and where home life starts and stops. So talk a little bit about burnout in the remote or hybrid work era versus the traditional in-office type of burnout. Is there a difference, and how do you identify it?
So I think our society as a whole is pretty accustomed to sort of celebrating busyness and constant productivity. And ultimately, that's always been an unhealthy thing. So it's interesting to see over the past 18 months, too, of people recognizing this as something that isn't sustainable for personal lives and for work lives. So, I think burnout and anxiety and isolation and a number of other mental health issues are things that all companies struggle with, whether you're working remotely or in an office. But the difference in a remote setting is it can be a bit harder to spot because you're not necessarily seeing someone every single day in person or even regularly. So it does require a lot more intentionality to notice it and then mitigate it, because oftentimes people can just, for a 30-minute video call, act like they're fine and move on because they don't want to call attention to themselves or any number of other reasons. So, when I think about this sort of era we're in now, it's awesome that so many of these conversations are starting to come up, and leaders are really realizing that this is important for every part of their business, from just taking care of their people to the actual productivity that can happen if you're able to support people through every aspect of their lives as whole people. So the burnout conversation has always been important, but I think it's even accelerated this year, especially.
There's a word about nomenclature on this topic, Betsy. I mean, we talk about digital burnout, remote work burnout. Is there a distinction between digital burnout, remote burnout? Are they identical, distinct, contiguous? What exactly?
Yeah, I'd actually say that digital burnout is happening to all of us right now, remote work or not.
Could be.
The pandemic has kind of stretched our limits on screen time in general, like having to connect with family and friends virtually, or, I look at friends who are having to do their weddings on Zoom and things like that. It's just not a normal level of digital engagement in general. But it can certainly become a problem if someone's also working all day on their laptop and then continues at night, and you're just never taking a break from your devices. And that can be the case even if you do work in a physical office. But again, it can more easily go unnoticed in a remote setting. So you want to know whether someone's literally spending all day at their desk. And when it comes down to it, it's really, as a personal, goal, it's all about setting healthy boundaries for rest and time away from work, and making sure that you're part of a team, or that you lead a team that has, people that understand that and are willing to hold you accountable for doing that.
Well said, well said. Okay, now let's move on to our case study, our near-to-hand, real-world case study right here. And let's talk about the 5 ways we might be able to spot remote burnout or burnout in general in a report or colleague. Beginning with number 1, Betsy, what's the key thing managers and teams should be looking out for? So
I would say number 1 is notice their motivation, performance, engagement as a whole. If you see a drop in these areas and, someone may be working seamlessly, ending endless working hours, that's a sign that you should be asking more questions and taking a better look into whether they're taking the right amount of time off, whether they're able to step away and rest. This can be kind of difficult when you work in an asynchronous environment like GitLab, because we do encourage people to work nonlinear work days when it works for them. If you want to spend your whole day with your kids and then work at night instead, that's great. We don't care when you're working. In general, as long as you're producing the results that you, have set up for you. But the line is drawn when someone's, consistently not taking that time to do something that they love or pursue a hobby or, spend time with their family, and all they're doing is working. So it's that one's a bit tricky, because you do have to have that balance of allowing people to have the autonomy to work when they want, but knowing when you can notice that, their motivation is kind of dropping, or they're not as productive as usual, or they seem to literally be online 24 hours a day. So that would be number 1.
Okay, great. And I'll be looking out henceforth for Tim's team's availability in the middle of the night. Okay, I want to see it offline, Tim. Okay. Number 2, please, Betsy. Go on.
Number 2, I would say look and listen for physical signs. Oftentimes, stress and burnout manifests physically, and I think we've all felt that at some point. But things like just having constant headaches and fatigue or not sleeping well, that's a bit hard to notice if you're someone's manager and you're not asking how they're feeling. So, that does require a bit more of a conversation to be had if you're looking at this in other people. But, listen, if your team member or someone on your team is complaining about just constantly being exhausted and, not able to get that good sleep or sunshine or just a time away from their screen, you might be able to notice those physical signs that can lead to burnout eventually as well.
Very good. Well, we've already heard from Tim. There are few of those going around, so ticking the boxes here. Ticking the boxes.
Yeah, we are.
Number 3, please, Betsy. Go.
Observe their interactions with others. I think this one's important because sometimes someone who's usually very, energetic and even keel can be short-tempered, or they may not even be willing to do something like turn on their camera. Like at GitLab, we all try to use our video if we can. And so if somebody's just kind of like hiding in the shadows most of the time, which I see.
The camera has gone off.
I see Tim's is off. Things like that, you can kind of notice if there's change in behavior with their interactions with your team. And, it takes a little bit of knowing someone as well personally to be able to notice those differences, but that's an important one too.
This is very informative, Betsy. We're on the penultimate one now. Tell us, number 4.
Number 4 is actually, I would say, so I actually have 4. I've grouped these into smaller groups. So we're going with top 4 tips instead of 5. Sorry to throw you off.
That's okay. Could have told me at the beginning, but that's fine. Go on. The final 4th entry of our list. Go on.
So this one is more about noticing things in yourself. So I would say this is where you need to really take a hard look in the mirror and check in with yourself. And if you feel like you are unable to make time or energy for things outside of work, if you constantly feel yourself prioritizing work over your family or your friends and your hobbies, you can pretty much take that as a sign that you have an unhealthy imbalance somewhere and that it's time to make some changes. So I think one of the most important things is being able to recognize that in yourself, and then you're more easily able to recognize it in others as well. I think we've all experienced this at some point. So kind of having that vulnerability to recognize it is a huge step in this process.
And let me just say, I'm tired of the top 10 and the top 5 and the top 3. I think the top 4, Betsy, differentiates you. So that's really good.
There's lots. These are all broken out in our handbook guides and in our all remote guides about, a bunch of different ways to look for it. So I tried to group them together so that we're not talking about it for, 2 hours, but.
So let's group, and maybe not in a group of 4, but in general, you've talked about the warning signs and what to look for. What do people do in terms of response and intervention, whether it's as a manager of people, but also managers aren't immune to this either, right? You can notice these warning signs in yourself, in your own work and behavior. So what is a person to do either for themselves or for the folks that they manage?
So first of all, combating burnout and isolation, we really consider it a team sport. So it requires participation from every level in your company. So it starts with the leadership level, where they need to be the ones to really establish a non-judgmental culture where it's okay to talk about these things and bring them up. And it's not like a shameful thing that you need to take a step back or get something off your plate. And then the next level with managers, who are people who actually interact with their teams on a daily basis, they need to be the ones that are really on the lookout and are asking the right questions of their team in one-on-ones and, really making sure that they're digging into how people are doing. And then it takes effort from the individual to actually be open to having those conversations and saying to their manager, like, I really need help. So it is a team sport here, but I'll share a few things that like each of those levels can do. One thing for leaders and managers is ensuring that you're modeling this. Tim, you just said that, like, it's important that leaders recognize it in themselves and then are willing to say that to their team. Like, hey, I'm taking a couple of days off because I'm really feeling burnt out. And that opens up that two-way communication and builds so much trust with your team to be able to have those conversations too. And then also that you're setting them up with realistic expectations. So if you say that you support the team in reducing their workload if they're burnt out or figuring out ways to better have balance in their lives, but then you set these unrealistic expectations, like 40 projects they have to complete in a certain amount of time, that's not going to work. So it's important to also, be able to work with your team to say, okay, what's realistic for you with everything that you have going on, both at work and in your life right now, and kind of pace things from there. As a company, you don't want to celebrate long working hours. Yes, celebrate someone who might have pushed extra effort for a certain project, but you don't want to be like, hey, congratulations for working all weekend on this thing. We want to not encourage that behavior. We also at GitLab at the beginning of the pandemic, our leaders did notice that productivity had increased when they were actually expecting it to drop a little bit just naturally because people suddenly were on lockdown for the first time in their lives and lots going on. And so that was a sign that they needed to step in. And so they started May of 2020, we had our first Friends and Family Day where the entire company shuts down. Everyone spends time doing something that they love that is outside of work. And we've actually had one every single month after that. So we have one, I believe, next Friday, just to get everyone to sign off their laptops and go do something outside or whatever they love to do. So there are things that like at the company leader level, they can also do. When you get down to like individuals, I think it's really important too, and this could actually be a mitigation strategy for managers, but ask questions that are more than just a yes or no answer. You want to really dig in with questions that are going to elicit a response that actually matters. So if you say like, are you doing well today? Yes or no, like it's not, even if they said no, there's nothing else there. So you really want to ask things like, is there anything I can help unblock you with? Like, what's going on in your personal life? Like, can I help you with balancing, work so that you can focus on that? The questions that actually will start that conversation are what you as a team member and then also as a manager want to be asking in one-on-ones or even coffee chats if you're able to kind of bring that conversation up then. And then, like we said, figuring out how to, really manage burnout before it hits that wall. If you aren't able to do that and you do have to, kind of have someone step in and say, hey, you need to take a week off and just be away. Then once you get back, you want to work with, either your manager or reach out to your, employee assistance program if your company has that. Figure out ways that you can like work in strategies that will prevent that from happening in the future, like working a nonlinear workday, meditation, taking breaks. There's so many things that all of us could be doing better with that, just taking one baby step in that direction is helpful as an individual too.
But let's talk about technology, Betsy, because when people are working remotely, technology obviously plays a huge role in causing burnout. But is there some way it can be used conversely to help ameliorate and improve the issue also?
There are a number of tools now that are helping people and teams tackle this and try to like track things like how much time they're spending in meetings or whether they've taken time off recently. So those are examples of ways that technology is helping this a little bit, kind of on the back end. So for example, at GitLab, we have a bot on Slack for PTO, and it helps us not only remember to take time off, but when somebody is out, it reminds us as a team that that person's out, don't bother them. We're not going to send them this ping. So it kind of helps us respect people's boundaries when they are taking that time away. And so while it does, it some teams track PTO to only allocate a certain amount, whereas we do have unlimited PTO, and we actually track it so that we can encourage people to take more time off. Because if you as a manager notice like, oh, Tim hasn't taken a day off since January, that's where you need to step in and kind of force it at that point and really encourage them just to sign off. Even if they have nowhere to go, they just need to not be logged into their laptop for a day.
January 1963 will have you know.
How old do you think I am, Tom?
No. When he was born.
I did see recently, too, that there's a new feature in Google Calendar that tracks how many hours you're spending in meetings, which I think is just brilliant, because we often will see meetings kind of spread out throughout your week on your calendar, but you never think about how many hours of your week you're actually spending in a meeting. And oftentimes, like at GitLab, we look for as many opportunities as we can to work asynchronously and cancel meetings because we don't want to get to that Zoom fatigue burnout level. So the technology there helps too. And then the last thing I'll mention, one of my favorite things that we have at GitLab is that we use Slack for informal communication more than we do work. We try to get work into the GitLab tool and use Slack to get to know each other. And so we have all of these channels in Slack that are like special interest groups. There's one for dogs and parents and hobbies and travel, everything. But my favorite one in this past 18 months has been our mental health channel. And so that channel is actually this open forum where team members are sharing resources and supporting each other, sending virtual hugs. I mean, whatever people need, or, sharing articles and things that might be helpful, or just asking for assistance. So I just think that's a really cool way. It's not only like removing the stigma of talking about this stuff at work, and it's like allowing people to really bring their full selves to work every day, but it's also a way that Slack, which sometimes can cause burnout, is being used in a more productive fashion. So I've really appreciated that, we can help build some psychological safety and let people be seen.
I think that's a great example of the blending of technology and people and process, right? It's not just about Slack as a tool. It's about what you do with it and how you use it, and dedicating it to non-business, I think, is a great piece of advice. I've talked with a lot of customers. I've done a lot of presentations, and more recently, I'm hearing more requests for, and our customers are talking more about getting IT out of its silo of technology and collaborating with the business, collaborating with HR specifically, so that the feedback that does come in is actionable. If IT asks, how are you feeling? And you say, I feel horrible, IT doesn't know what to do with that. It's not actionable for them. So I'm curious if you're seeing that kind of proximity between IT and HR come together. Is it something that you think is going to be maybe a retained trend once this whole thing is over?
I certainly, for companies and teams that did not have a robust tool stack prior to the pandemic for remote work, because that's something that I think a lot of teams scrambled with, is how do we figure out what tools to use so that our team can stay connected and continue to be productive. So for GitLab, there's definitely been less of an upheaval or changes to the main tools that we use during this time. But it is exciting to see how many tools have emerged to solve a need or improve the way that we connect virtually. And so I absolutely do see, that continuing, in the IT teams and the HR teams figuring out, okay, which tools do we want to use and how do we kind of teach people how we're using them? So that's sort of the part that I think some companies forget to follow up on, is that if you have all these tools, tell people where to communicate and where you want to channel certain discussions and where you do not, because it's going to remove a lot of the stress from the situation of how do we use these in the most appropriate way. And so, we really believe that minimizing your tool stack as much as possible and choosing the right things for your team, and then documenting how you use them. So whether that's, probably a partnership between HR and IT to say, IT will provision this access and here's how we want you to use it. And HR is encouraging you, to use it to connect in this way. So that partnership's only going to continue, for remote teams and for even companies that decide to go partially back in the office or some type of hybrid setup.
Great note to end on. We need to go away, Betsy, and get Tim the help and support he needs.
I feel better already.
And
I
deserves.
Feel like this was
your rest ethic, Tim.
This is a great therapy session. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, it's a great conversation to have.
And if listeners would like to get more insights into that subtle interplay between technology, processes and people, and indeed its relationship to the virtual workplace, they should be sure to check out our DEX Hub mothership, which they can find a link to in the show notes. Betsy, a great pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Betsy.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.